As noted in a prior video, the unique German immigrant experience of migrating into the Midwest to being able to farm readily and easily likely led in part to them not developing a mafia, unlike the Irish, Italians, and Chinese that all have famous historical mafias in US cities. But this begs the obvious question. Other countries knew how to farm too. Most of the Irish and Italian immigrants moving to the United States were also farmers. Why were they not able to farm at the same proportional level as the Germans? Well, maps explain everything. Here's a climate map of Europe compared to a climate map of the United States. And the first thing that's obvious is Germany's climate most readily matches the Midwest climate, which was the most easily accessible farmland at the time. You see, most European immigrants were landing in the Northeast, in New York, Philadelphia, Boston, but they didn't have much farmland immediately accessible to them due to the Appalachians. They could move down south, where the southeast region of the United States was very hospitable to all different types of farming, but it was already dominated by the established English and Scottish and their slaves, which left only the Midwest. And as this was before the internet, you only took the farming skill set you had from your homeland. The Germans were used to farming in a cool continental climate, which just happened to match the Midwest climate, whereas the Italians were used to a Mediterranean climate. The Mediterranean climate was nowhere near the northeastern United States, so their farming skills weren't very useful in New England or the Midwest. Now, if the Italians had happened to land in California, in San Francisco, Los Angeles, maybe things would have been different, as California's climate, Mediterranean, more closely matches Italian's climate. The same applies to the Irish. The Irish have an oceanic climate. Landing in New England, their only option to move to the Midwest, which was a cool continental, didn't do them much good. If they had instead landed in the Pacific Northwest, which matches their same oceanic climate, they may have done extremely well. Potatoes grow great in Washington, but instead they got unlucky, landing on the northeastern side instead of the western side, where their home climates more closely matched those in the United States. This is why in the Midwest, not only do you see strong German ethnic roots, but also Polish ethnic roots and Scandinavian ethnic roots like Sweden and Norway. It's because the most easily accessible farmland in the United States in the mid-1800s was the Midwest. And the Midwest farming climate most closely resembled that of northeastern Europe. To double the irony, not only did Irish and Italian farmers get screwed in the lottery of America's climate, the Chinese, for example, also got screwed. The majority of Chinese immigrants into the United States for most of history came from the southeast portion of China known as Canton, and the Canton region's climate most closely resembles that of southeastern United States, but instead they landed in the western United States, where the climate is Mediterranean. Again, not their home country's climate. In a great twist of irony, if the Chinese had happened to land in Georgia and South Carolina, and the Italians had happened to land in California, maybe we would be thinking about American farming and its demographics very differently in 2023. But instead, it was the Germans that got most lucky when immigrating into the United States, as their home country's climate most closely resembled that of the accessible farmland in the United States. And this, among many things, likely led the Germans in particular not to develop a mafia, whereas the Chinese, Irish, Italians, and Japanese, because they could not farm, were stuck in densely populated cities where they were forced to work within the rapidly industrializing USA and its extreme levels of discrimination. This in turn, with few other options available, incentivized each of them to form underground economic networks like mafias rooted in their ethnicity. Ultimately, it shows that while the reasons the German mafia never developed in the United States are complicated, a large factor was pure dumb geographical luck. In the 1800s, a German immigrant's farming experience just happened to more easily graft onto America's climate compared to many other European nations.